classically trained pianist and piano educator. Welcome to my channel. In my last video, I shared my playing of Schubert's Impromptu in A-flat major, Op.90 No. 4, and promised that I will make a tutorial on this piece. Here I am. I'm going to give you a detailed analysis of the piece, as well as a step-by-step guide on how to master this piece both technically and artistically. This is a very popular impromptu by Schubert for a number of reasons. First of all, the notes are relatively easy to read. It won't take very long to learn the piece. In addition, it's in ABA form, so that means the last section is the same as the first one. Secondly, it's fairly accessible from a technical perspective. I would say this piece is about late intermediate to early advanced level. So people who played some sonatinas or Mozart's piano sonatas should handle this piece very well. Thirdly, it's a beautiful piece. It gives us great joy when playing it. The opening section has a very playful character, and the middle section is a big contrast to the opening. By the way, this piece was written 1 year before the composer's death, along with his famous song cycle Die Winterreise. So it's not surprising that it carries a similar emotional complexity. However, speaking from my experience of both teaching and playing this piece, I have to say it's not as easy as it appears, especially if you try to play it artistically, the way the masters did, such as Radu Lupu, who had a legendary recording on the entire impromptus by Schubert. This is why I want to share some practice tips and interpretation ideas with all of you, and hopefully it will make your learning process easier and more effective. Let's start right from the beginning. What is the first thing do you usually look at in a new piece? Well, for me, it's the tempo mark. In this case, it's marked with allegretto. That means moderately fast, so it should be slower than allegro. Over the years, I heard many students and sometimes even professional pianists play this piece way too fast. I don't think any of Schubert's music is meant to show off one's technique. And for this particular piece, playing too fast will inevitably cause a common problem, which is to make this piece sound like an etude or finger exercise. I think we should make every effort to avoid that. Now, let's look at the descending broken chord pattern. I know a lot of people have trouble playing the repeated notes. Either they cannot play them clearly or they make unintentional accents on the repeated notes. I have a 3-step solution for you to try in your practice, which should help you fix the problem. By the way, I made some notes here so that I don't forget anything important. Number 1, practice in medium tempo and use semi-legato touch, so the notes are slightly detached, like this. And then the next phrase. Now, when you're playing this way, listen closely as you change fingers on the repeated notes, because that's where the unevenness tends to happen, and really try to give equal weight to each finger. See, be careful when you change the finger. It needs to be very soft because it's marked with pianissimo, so don't press all the way down. I only play halfway down. By doing this, you can feel how much you need to press each key to match the sound from one note to the next. The second step is to play with wrist rotation. The rotation used here is a micro movement, almost unnoticeable when playing at full speed, but it is essential to making these descending broken chord patterns extremely smooth. Let me show you in slow motion. to exaggerate this rotation so that you can see even better. What I did was I tilt my hand on the first two notes. I tilt my hand to the right side and then fall back. And then I do that again. So I'm kind of going back and forth. My hand is rocking back and forth. Now, this rotation not only makes the 16 notes more legato, but also the transition from one group to the next more seamless. If I don't move my wrist and only rely on my fingers, the notes will not be nearly as smooth. They will sound stiff and mechanical. You can also hear the separation between the groups. See, it's very stiff. So if you can master this small rotation, then you have the key to solve the problem. After you get comfortable with the first two steps, you should increase your speed and practice faster now. The next step is to practice in small groupings. Try to group 6 notes instead of 4, like this. And make sure the change of fingers from 1 to 3 or 1 to 2, see here? Okay, make sure the change of fingers from 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 is perfectly smooth. There's no accent. And then little by little, you can practice the whole phrase. See, like that. And then the next one, see? You can group 6 notes at a time or 5 notes, like, see? That would work too. Sorry. One of the common problems is that people tend to hold their thumb too long when playing the repeated notes. See here? So they would have trouble when changing the fingers. Now you really need to let go of your thumb as soon as possible so that the key can come up before you hit it again. And then when you play faster, the repeated notes will still be clear. And then of course, always combined with the wrist rotation. Okay, and gradually you can play the whole phrase. So the point is to start with small segment of the phrase so you can easily examine where the notes are still not clear or even, or where you still feel uncomfortable. Then you can target those trouble areas and fix them. And gradually the whole phrase will flow beautifully. there's one more thing I want to mention. This passage is quite demanding on the piano. So if the keys don't respond well enough, no matter how efficient your fingers are, the repeated notes will still not be clear. So check the action of your piano and make sure the keys are responsive. Or you need your piano tuners to regulate the keys. Now let's say you have worked out all of the 16th notes. They're perfectly smooth and even, but you still feel something is missing. It's still not musical enough. Well, when we play a passage with similar patterns, like this opening section, we need to add colors and shades to each phrase so that it doesn't sound repetitive. This is actually the secret sauce to artistic playing. For instance, when you look at the score, there's only pianissimo written at the beginning and occasionally a few crescendo and diminuendo. Does it mean you're going to play every phrase in pianissimo? Of course not. We need to look beyond these markings and figure out the expressions and mood behind those notes. In order to accomplish that, the first thing we need to do is to understand the underlying tonal structure. Like I mentioned in my last video, Schubert is a master of modulations. He is like a magician when it comes to key changes. One of the things he liked to do is to switch between major and minor keys, and the way he did it was so unexpected but spontaneous. For example, this piece was written with 4 flats, which is supposed to be in A flat major, but it actually starts in A flat minor. Then 12 measures later, it moves up to C flat major. C flat major is the relative major key of A flat minor. But not for long before it shifts back to B minor. B minor is the parallel minor key of B major. Why B major? Because B is the inharmonic name of C flat. So you see the relation between these key changes? I strongly recommend that you look at this opening section as a whole and block the 16 notes and play them in chords. Listen to the chord progression and tonal changes, like this. We are. Finally, we're in A flat major, the home keys. When you play this way, you really need to open your ear and use your imaginations. Try to assign different colors to each phrase. For example, the opening phrase sounds a little gloomy to me, so I have this grayish blue color in my mind when I play this phrase. And then when it moves up to C flat major, I feel this uplifting spirit, as if a beam of sunlight comes through the clouds. So naturally, I will play that phrase a little brighter. And let me show you the transition from A flat minor to C flat major. Music travels to B minor, the light seems to dim again. I'm using una quarta here to change the color, By the way, 1/4 is the soft pedal. It's the one on the left. It not only softens the sound, but create a different tone quality. Let's just listen. As soon as you start thinking and feeling this way, you will find this passage become much more colorful. And since every person feels differently, this section could have so many possibilities. Just keep in mind, no matter what you decide to do, the dynamic contrast should be subtle. After all, this whole section should remain light. Now, let's talk about the chords between the 16-note phrases. They are marked with both staccato and legato. You want to bounce your wrist a little bit to lighten up your touch. At the same time, use paddle to connect the chords and make them sing. Now, these chords should also be played with some rubato, especially the last one, which is 8 measures long. You definitely don't want to play all of the chords exactly the same. So let me show you one more time. This is what I did. So I took a little bit time at the beginning of the phrase. And then just let go. See, I push forward here. And then gradually slow down and get softer to close the phrase. So you want to vary the timing on these chords. Moving on to the second page, starting in measure 39, we have a 4-bar phrase. Once again, you can just block these notes and play the chords and decide how you want to shape them. Like this. And then again. I think the traditional way of playing 4-bar phrase is to open up a little bit on the 3rd measure to rise, and then close the phrase on the last measure, so play less. Get a little louder here, and then softer, rise up, and then softer. There's one interesting characteristic about this section I want to point out. Let's look at the left hand. In the first 8 bars, we have this short and bouncy pattern. Then it changes to this legato and lyrical melodic line. It just keeps to expand. Now, I think this is a very interesting contrast that we should bring out. So when I play the first half, this left-hand rhythmic pattern, this umpa rhythmic pattern in left hand reminds me of a very playful dance character. So I keep my paddle short and play it more rhythmically. When I get to the second half, I try to grow a long line in left hand and keep my right hand really quiet. By the way, you probably noticed there's an accent in every measure measure on the second note, and you need to play that with your thumb. I think you do need to show these accents, but please be careful. Don't just throw your thumb onto the key because it can make a very harsh sound. So what I did was I used my arm to play these accented notes. So I can have a cushion sound. So this is another detail to watch out. When we get to the third page, it's pretty much the same pattern, except the dynamics are getting louder and louder, the notes are moving higher and higher. Finally, after reaching D flat major, the notes start to heading down and we hear a new melody. Does it sound familiar? Well, it actually comes from the left-hand melody earlier. It grows out of that. Here, it is a little tricky to transit from the 16 notes to triplets. I personally wouldn't slow down too much because it's still in the middle of the piece, and pretty soon we'll have a big transition going into the middle section, the trill. But I think a little rubato at the beginning of the triplets would be really nice, like this. And make sure your paddle is clean. Another element I want to mention is the two chords in left hand. So the first one is a diminished seventh chord. And the second one is a dominant seventh. The diminished seventh chord usually represents conflict and tension, and the dominant seventh is a resolution from the first one. I think this is a very expressive moment in the piece, which should be played with care. And then getting softer. Now, let's talk about my favorite part of the piece, the trill section. I love this part. It gives me goosebumps every time I play it. To describe how I feel. But let me explain how to work on this section. First, let's play the extract or skeleton of the part. So right hand, please leave out the middle voice, the repeated chords. We're going to work on them later, okay? So only play the top note melody. And then for left hand, instead of playing all of the eighth note chords, let's just play quarter notes. So 3 chords per measure. Like that. And now let's put hands together. And by the way, make sure to lift your hand at the end of each phrase, just like a singer would need to brace between the phrases. how to shape the phrase and what notes you want to emphasize and where to take time, etc. Next, let's work on the eighth notes. This is the tricky part because these notes are very easy to get thick and heavy, disturbing the melodic line. I strongly recommend that you practice hands separately, starting with left hand first. And I have a very important tip. That is, when you play these repeated chords, your fingers should feel like they're glued onto the keys. They just move up and down with the keys. Don't ever come off. And of course, you can do the same thing with right hand. This way, you can really feel the weight of the keys and use only minimum effort. You don't want to actively play those chords because they will get loud and stiff. Try to soften your sound as much as possible so that we can hear the melody really well. By the way, the dynamic ratio between melody and accompaniment should be 2 levels apart. Let's say if you play your melody in mezzo piano, then your accompaniment should remain in pianissimo. And when you put all parts together, you will have the perfect balance. Particularly challenging in right hand because it plays both the melody and accompaniment. So basically, you need 2 different types of touches to achieve that. Trust me, this definitely takes time to develop. But if you keep working on it, you will get better and better. This trio section definitely needs rubato. As music develops, the emotions are intensified, and you need to respond to that. Let me start from measure 123. Right here, we have an augmented fourth in left hand. That A and D sharp, blah, 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 blah. That dissonance is really significant to me, so I would definitely want to take some time here and also put a little emphasis onto the left hand. One more time. A major moment. And why do I say this is a major moment? Well, let's look at how we started. I just have this warm sensation as if the snow has melted and the spring is here. And listen to that leap going from G sharp to E sharp. It is magical. So you definitely want to take a little bit time to show the tenderness. One more tip. You can try to move your body a little bit away from the piano when playing this part. Sometimes the distance between you and your piano can affect the tone production. When you're farther away, you can achieve the lightness in your hands, which suits perfectly for this spot. To lean in, because when you do that, your sound will get more concentrated and more intense. One final word here about this transition. Definitely use soft pedal to stay in the dreamy atmosphere. And here we have the diminished seventh again. And now dominant seven. And we're back home. Thank you for watching. I hope my analysis and demonstrations will spark some great ideas in your playing. If you'd like to watch my performance of the entire piece, click the link below. Finally, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and of course, remember to subscribe. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.